happy Wednesday, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us here on the Transportation and Logistics podcast powered by Atlanta Dispatch and Humblebee Enterprises. I'm very excited to be here with this very special guest. We got our brother Elisha of Ace Insurance Agency. He's been here before, but we're very, very grateful to have him again. And before we get started, I did want to share a message, right? So there's been a soundbite that's been my very, 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 very most favorite soundbite of 2022. And this is what Pastor Mike Todd said. He said, the greatest version of you is not the I can do anything version of you. The greatest version of you is the disciplined version of you. The greatest version of you is the one that has parameters. And then he gives examples. I don't do that. I don't drink that. I don't go there with these people. I'm focused, right? And we have 2 weeks left in 2022. And I pray that, you take heed from those words as we enter 2023. But without further ado, what's up, brother? How you doing today, Elisha?
I'm good. I'm good. How you guys doing today?
Brother, very, very blessed. Thank you so much for asking. I appreciate you for being here. I did want to go ahead and set the foundation for this discussion. This is about really insurance. It's about drayage, obviously, but specifically the way that insurance intersects with drayage. Okay, and again, setting that foundation. We know that the FMCSA requires 750,000 on automobile liability coverage to get a carrier authority. Most brokerages, however, require a little bit more. So we're going to say that most motor carriers have to have at least 100K in cargo coverage and 1 million in automobile and general liability coverage to move freight for them. That's just the industry standard. Sometimes you have more. Sometimes a broker might say you have to have 250K on the cargo, and you got to have an aggregate of 2 mil on those other ones. But look, let me ask you this: although general liability coverage is not always required, by domestic truckload brokerages, is it a staple in the drayage world? Like, do you have to have general liability to do drayage?
Yes,
And
it's
why is that?
100% required. Because of the risk tolerance with a lot of these equipment providers. Remember, you're not only doing business with the broker that you're pulling the load for. You're also doing business with the equipment provider that owns the container as well. So, any event that something happens, they want to make sure that not only do you have auto liability coverage to cover bodily injury and things of that nature, if the truck gets into an accident, but they also want to make sure that the general liability that your company in itself is insured.
Okay. No, I feel it. I feel it. And, that's interesting that you say that. I can see why that's a very, very important. Another one of those things that is, iffy. Not all brokers require this, but actually is predicated normally on where the motor carrier is based out of. Like, where is their company registered out of? That says whether or not they have to get workers' compensation. Is that something that is required for every single drayage provider, no matter where they're based out of?
No, it's not
Okay.
required. So
Okay.
you do have to know your local laws, for the state that you're operating in, and whether or not if your drivers are W-2 or if they're 1099. If you're allowed to put your drivers on a W-2 or a 1099 based on the local laws in the state that you're in. But with the UIIA, most of the equipment providers do not require you to have workman's compensation. The only time you really run into it is when you're dealing with, you're trying to register with the rail yards. So if you're trying to deal with CSX, Norfolk Southern Rail, things of that nature, there is an addendum that you do have to fill out. It's additional steps. So you have to fill out an addendum on the UIIA website in order to actually get approved to do the rail yards, and you may even have to fill out an addendum to be approved to handle certain equipment providers' containers. But if you're in one of those states, or if you do qualify to be exempt from workman's compensation, what you have to actually do is write a letter on your company's letterhead, and submit that to the UIIA, and they'll actually approve you for that equipment provider in lieu of you having workman's compensation.
Okay, cool. I didn't know that you can get around it that way. I
Yeah,
really.
you can definitely get around it, because you got to understand, like, a lot of guys, especially if you're in Texas, you're not required to have workman's comp unless you have over a certain amount of W-2 employees. So in a state like Texas, you don't. It's not required to have it. Why pay the 14% of your payroll percentage to maintain workman's comp if it's not a state requirement? Or if you're a one-man band, meaning you have you're the owner and the driver, you're essentially exempt from workman's comp because you don't have any employees. So the way around it is, you just write a letter saying I'm exempt from workman's comp, and you submit it.
Gotcha. Okay, now that makes perfect sense. And you mentioned something that I did want to, talk about a little bit more. All right, the UIIA. All right,
Mm-hmm.
how does a motor carrier get their company in the UIIA, and why is that important that they even do that in the first place?
So to me, I think every trucking company should have a connection to the UIIA. It just helps you diversify your portfolio and also broaden your horizons when when you're getting into trucking. The first thing you have to do is make sure that the policy that is being offered to you, and unfortunately, for the guys that have Progressive, this is not something that will be an option for you. But you have to make sure that the policy being offered to you has what's called a UIIE1 endorsement, or the Truckers Uniform Intermodal Interchange Endorsement on your policy. And that essentially means that you have what's called any and all owned autos on your policy, or hired and non-owned on your insurance policy. Those are the endorsements that are also required, and they're not expensive. It may cost you an extra $400 a year to have those endorsements on there. But if you have those endorsements on your policy, at that point, I would recommend you applying for a scac code. Get your scac code, file for your insurance code with the UIIA, and then work with an experienced agent. Make sure you have an experienced agent that is able to upload your blanket certificate of insurance, or your Accord 22 form to the UIIA, so you can start getting approved with the equipment providers that you're going to be working with.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, I appreciate you going through that. I mean, so you got to have the UII E1 endorsement on your insurance in order to, be able to get into the UIIA. UIIA stands for Uniform Intermodal Interchange and Facilities Access Agreement. In case you guys missed some of the previous discussions we've had about drayage. But there's one other thing that a motor carrier would have to get in order to be able to get into the UIIA system, and that's the scat code. What is the scat code, and what is it really for?
All right, so the scat code is issued, and guys, you got to bear with me because I know its acronyms, but I got to look it up while I'm on the phone
No,
with
no,
you.
I got you. That's
Yeah, but
like
the
the
scat code, it stands for Standard Carrier Alpha Code. And the scat code is actually issued by the scat code is issued by by the National Motor Freight Traffic Association. So in order to get a scat code, you actually have to go to nmfta.org, apply for your scat code there first, and then once you get your scat code, then you go to the UIIA and get your insurance code.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's basically a trifecta, you would say. You got to get
Yes,
your authority, you got to get the endorsement on your insurance, and then you got to get your scat code. Are
correct.
we missing? Are we leaving anything out?
The only what I would recommend is making sure that the agent that you're going to be working with is experienced with this process, because unfortunately, if you get a scat code and get an insurance code, and you find out after the fact that your insurance is not compliant with the UIA, if you don't upload, if your agent doesn't upload, or if you don't upload documents proving that you have But basically, if you don't upload the documents to the UIIA within a 30-day period, you're gonna have to start the process all over again. And
Mm.
you have to pay that. You have to pay that. I think the fee. The last time I checked, I think the fee was $385 to register with the UIA, and it may be more now. That was a year ago, so it may even be maybe more.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I appreciate you giving me that additional information. Okay. And all right. So now we're actually talking about, operating. Okay. So you got to have those things that we just mentioned. But if you actually have a driver that's going to be able to pull these loads, they have to have a TWIC card. How does that come into play when it relates to drayage? I mean, I'm asking you because I know you got advanced knowledge on all these things. Like all of this. So I want to pull all these details out so that people who are really, not who have never heard this, but they're a
Mm-hmm.
new motor carrier or they're about to get their authority, they just know the process like right now.
So your drivers have to have TWIC cards. Okay, that's first and foremost. In order to access the port, and depending on what terminals you're going to be pulling out of, you have to get. All right, for now. Now I'm going to just throw this out there. I'm experienced with the Northeast because I'm in Jersey when it comes down to the ports. Even though we work with ports in 28 states across the country, I'm the most familiar with Port New York, and the Philly port, right? So up here in Jersey, we have the TWIC card, and then we also have a C-Link that you have to have as well. Okay, so the C-Link up in Jersey is very similar to the PIN code that you guys have down in Port Savannah and that area. Okay, the C-Link is tied to the actual motor carrier or the MC number for the motor carrier that you're going to be operating under. With the TWIC card, you have to get the TWIC card first. And the TWIC card is Transportation Workers Identification Card. Okay? The first thing you have to do is you have to apply for your TWIC card. The only thing that will disqualify you from getting a TWIC card, and a lot of people don't realize this, is if you have a felony that pertains to terroristic threats. Okay?
Specifically.
Specifically.
Okay.
Specifically. Okay? If you have something on your jacket that is 7 years removed, you can apply for a TWIC card. If they deny you for the TWIC card, at that point, you can apply for an appeal and go through the appeal process, and you should get approved. I've had a lot of my guys go through this process and actually get their TWIC card. It took them a little longer, but they did get their TWIC card because they were 7 years removed from the date from the conviction.
What's the value of the TWIC card? Like, why does one need it?
So I have a TWIC card,
Uh-huh.
even though I don't drive, right? And the reason
Uh-huh.
I have a TWIC card is the TWIC, first and foremost, the TWIC is an extensive background check that they are running on you as an individual, right? Once you get that TWIC card, it's going to open you up to the ability to access the ports because these are secure areas that are actually managed by U.S. Customs and U.S. DOT, right? In addition to the UIIA. So you're going on federal property when you have this TWIC card. The TWIC, so was one of the reasons why they actually require you to get the TWIC. Also, the TWIC card also acts as TSA pre-check. People don't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a TWIC card, you actually gives you the ability to bypass security at the airport in a certain degree. So you don't have to, remove your sneakers, shoes, things of that nature. But um, for my hazmat guys who have hazmat clearance on their CDLs, you've already done the first part of the TWIC application. All you have to do at this point is go get the actual identification card. But it's federal.
Okay.
It's another form of federal identity.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And this is how I found out what you just said. Just on the flip side, you said that you can use your TWIC card as a TSA pre-check. So I
Mm-hmm.
got the TSA pre-check in the global entry, and it was once I realized that I could have got the twic card to do those things. I was, well, I don't know about the global entry, but the TSA pre-check. That's how I found out. I went the other route to get that access, but I realized that you can
So
get the twic card to do it.
I realized that it's the same process when I
Yeah.
sent my driver to do it.
Mm.
So I sent my driver down there because I used to own. For those of you who don't know, I used to own Northern Atlantic Logistics as well. So we ran the ports. We ran dryage at the ports in Port New Jersey, and Philly. Um, so I sent my drivers down there to get it, and then I was like, you know what? Let me do this for myself. Just I have one as well. If I want to ever jump in the truck with the driver and do a ride along with the driver, one of my drivers, and I go down there, and he's like, oh, and I'm going through the process, and he's like, oh, this is also TSA pre-check. It's the same thing. The only difference is we actually give you a physical card with a chip and your phone and your picture on it. It's no different.
Mm. I hear you, brother. I hear you. And look, the fact is, the fact that you were operating out of the ports of Newark and right there out of New York, you have the ability to answer this. You guys just took over the title for the busiest ports in the United States. So, do you feel like they got the infrastructure to handle that influx of work?
Absolutely not.
No.
No.
Like, in what capacity? Long wait times for drivers trying to get on and off?
They don't have enough chassis to support the amount of work that's coming in, unfortunately. They don't have the manpower. In addition to the fact that not only do they not have the manpower, but because you don't have the manpower, enough manpower working the infrastructure, they also lack the knowledge to get things done. Um, I personally feel as though Virginia and Virginia Beach is probably is probably the best managed ports that I've seen thus far, and they should adopt some of the practices that they have down there because they're so close to military bases. I feel like they run that port like a military operation. And if they were to adopt some of those practices up here in Jersey, in the New York, New Jersey area, it would actually run a lot smoother. But you're talking ridiculous wait times. One of my drivers was stuck in a port for 8 hours in one particular terminal, and it was infamous for being stuck in there all day long before he could get out. It's just I kind of have PTSD
Oh,
when we
man.
start talking about the running the ports up here because if you don't have a driver that's get up and get in there and be online at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, depending on what terminal you're going to up here, you can blow an entire day trying to get one container out.
Oh, man. Man, man, man. Okay. And all right. So, I mean, since you have that experience, what was the process of actually picking up a chassis? Was that just as long? Like, was it?
Yeah, you
But go ahead.
mhm. You could literally burn an entire clock, um, waiting for a chassis. It was horrible up here in the summertime. Now it's gotten much better. Unfortunately, we're in a recession, so it's not the fact that it's gotten better. It's just that there isn't enough work to support the amount of truckers that we have in the area right now. Um, but I've had one of my guys. They said they waited uh, 8 hours, 8 to 9 hours for a chassis, just sitting waiting for a chassis. If you weren't like first or second in line trying to get a chassis, it's a good chance that you just wouldn't get one
So, do you feel like it's more so the cheat code to purchase your own chassis?
if you can find one. Right
Mm.
now is a good time to find one because again we're in a recession. People are starting to sell off equipment. So I would start looking for a chassis now. Start preparing for all my guys that hoarded cash and ran their businesses efficiently. I would start looking for my own chassis right now.
Got you.
I would definitely start looking for them. I do have a client out of Central Jersey. Um, during the last recession at the low, he actually acquired 20 chassis, and everybody told him he was crazy for it. And then you fast forward 2 years ago, he had 20 chassis. He had no issues.
Right.
because he wasn't worried about trying to find chassis from the chassis pool. He's not worried about leasing owner operators and trying to find them chassis, trying to have the owner operator sit in line. He's not worried about any of that stuff. He's got 20 chassis in rotation.
I hear
And
you.
if you and the crazy thing is, if you ask him if he'll sell you one, he'll tell you absolutely not, not a chance in hell.
I feel it, man. I definitely feel it. I mean, it's kind of a blessing. I do. I have a dispatch client who has 23 chassis, and just
Mm-hmm.
the fact that he doesn't have to worry about going through the pool, it definitely makes it different. So, no, I hear you, brother. I definitely hear you there. Okay. All right. So look, this part right here is a conversation that you and I had a little while ago that really inspired, why we're talking right now. Okay. And
Okay.
it's the fact that, okay, so the, you've gotten into the UIIA, you have your twic card, you
Mm-hmm.
are running, and you happen to, link up with a broker or, freight forwarder who does have that consistent those consistent opportunities, and so much so that when they get them, it's a huge influx of immediate containers. You might have your two trucks running every single day, dependable, but they need capacity for about 10 trucks a day, and
Mm-hmm.
they ask you, what can you do? A lot of people, you know a lot of trucking companies say, oh, I'm not going to let that pass me by. I'm going to take advantage of that opportunity. Have you heard of these type of situations before I keep going?
All the time.
Okay.
All
Okay.
the time.
And when that happens, what is the normal route that you've seen people go? Not the legal route. What's the normal route that you've seen people do in order to take advantage of that influx of, opportunity?
So what I've seen people do is they'll accept all 10 containers, right? Let's say, and I'm using 10 as a round number. They'll accept all 10 containers, knowing they can't handle pulling all 10 containers before the last and final day, or even storing 10 containers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what they'll do is they'll call up, truckers know truckers. When you're in a certain industry, everybody knows everybody. So what they'll do is they end up calling their friend, yo, I have 10 containers I need help pulling out. And all of these guys will go in and pull these containers out. And they all may have their own authorities, 9 times out of 10. Um, so now you have containers, let's say, Jory's Motor Carrier LLC, right? Jory's contracted to pull these 10 containers out, but he goes out and he gets 10, maybe three other guys to help him with them. Those three guys are going into the port pulling these containers out, but all of the work orders for these containers are in Jory's Transportation LLC. Who's responsible for those containers? Jory is, right?
Right, right.
Right. Now, what happens if one of those containers ends up missing? One of the containers flips, is damaged. Let's say the merchant, anything can happen, right? Who's responsible for that? Jury is, right? But the container was not in jury's possession when something happened to it. It was in somebody else's possession. So now you have an issue where jury's insurance is going, where's the container? Whose truck was driving it? The other guy's going, well, this container was in your possession. Um, Let me see the work order for the container because we have an interchange agreement here. We have to insure the cargo. I need to see the contract the contract or the manifest showing what goods that you were pulling at the time. And now we have all these insurance companies looking at each other going, you're not supposed to have this container in your possession. Jury's supposed to have it in your possession. What are you doing with it?
Mm-hmm.
You know? Does it
And
happen a lot? Yes. It's called day leasing. That's the terminology for it. It's called day leasing. It happens every day in the industry. Is it allowed? Absolutely not. It was banned in 1980 by the FMCSA. So it happens a lot, but we see it done every day.
I see. I didn't know there was an actual term. That might even
Yeah,
show. my age in this thing. Okay, so they lease it. Okay, and I mean, so if it was banned, I can understand because who's at fault? There's so many people to go around that, and nobody's insurance company wants to take a hold of that one. So it's been banned. Do you feel like the industry, right?
Hmm.
Do you feel like the industry look at this like double brokering on the domestic truckload side, or do you feel like they just say, okay, well, I need to get these moves, so I'm just gonna not look.
I feel like because of the demand that we had previously, post recession or pre recession,
Mm-hmm.
um, that a lot of people turned a blind eye to it. Unfortunately, brokers, motor carriers, freight forwarders, everybody turned a blind eye to it, and it always becomes an issue when something happens. Now, I always speak from experience. I have had this happen where one of my drivers pinned out a container out of Port of Savannah. He was not supposed to have that container in, was it Savannah? It might have been Savannah. I think it might have been South Carolina. He was not supposed to have this container in his possession, and unfortunately, the truck flipped. Okay, the
Mm-hmm.
truck flipped coming off of the interstate, making a left turn. He did not realize how heavy this container was, and it was on a dual axle chassis and not a triaxle, because the container should have been on a triaxle 40.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the weight of it, the weight and the commodity that was inside, it was plastic beads. The load shifted due to the speed that the driver was coming off the interstate, and it flipped.
Mm.
Yeah. So this is another reason why we don't like day leases, because if you don't provide the other motor carrier all of the information, they can show up with the wrong equipment to pull this container out. Right? Now, again, I'm always speaking from experience. If I tell you I need help with pulling a 20-foot container out of the port, but what I don't tell you is that it's a 60,000 pound 20-foot container that's loaded up with granite tile, with pieces of granite tile. You're gonna show up with a
A regular
you're gonna
20.
show up with a regular 20. Yeah, two axles on the 20. When you should have showed up with a tandem axle 20, right? You
Mm-hmm.
also should have an overweight permit because you're severely overweight. You're severely overweight. So if you show up with the wrong equipment, and of course that crane operator is not going to care, he's going to drop it on your chassis, and you go to pull out of there and you flip. Who's at who's one? Who's at fault? Two, who do you think DOT is not going to dig a grave for? You, because
And
you're way out of compliance.
right. No, I definitely hear you there, brother. So when it comes, all right. So you asked the question, but that was really one of the questions that I wanted to ask: is the ramifications for something like this? And let's take it to even a little bit further. Is it the dispatcher? Like, would the dispatcher be roped into that too? And I'm asking because I know that a lot of dispatchers do, work the ports. So if something like that is not communicated and there is something adverse that happens, there's an accident, the container flips, who really can get roped into the liability?
It really depends on the paper trail. Um, quite honestly, the liability could be brought on the dispatcher. Not necessarily the dispatcher, but the liability can be brought on to the broker if all of the information was not communicated. Case in point is one of my guys actually hit a bridge here in Jersey about 2 months ago. He pulled a container out that they told him it was legal height, and unfortunately, it was the commodity actually was, it was an open top container. The commodity was a cell phone tower. It was four parts of a cell phone tower. Um, Fortunately, one of the pieces to the cell phone tower was above 14 feet, and the driver should have showed up with a low boy flatbed gooseneck, and he showed up with a regular chassis. when they pulled it out, unfortunately, they were driving up the interstate, and the bridge that he went under, the driver saw that it was kind of low and didn't realize.
Hello.
He thought it was kind of low. Yeah, it was like, how low can you go? So it was kind of low, and he slowed down before he actually smacked this bridge. He was going under the bridge, and at the last tip, he wedged it.
Mm.
Yeah. Now, in a case like this, because the motor carrier was able to prove, that he did not provide him with enough information to show up with the correct equipment to pull us out. The motor carrier, the broker actually accepted responsibility for it. Luckily, he did, because when DOT showed up, state troopers showed up, and the not the wrecker, it's not the wrecker. It's called it's the other big with the crane on the back. I can't think of it, but anyway,
What,
when they
like it has
showed
a
up,
boom on it?
yeah, it's got the boom, it's got the straps, it's got everything on it. It's called the rotator. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When the
Rotate.
rotator showed up, they realized all they had to do was deflate the tires. So they deflate the tires to the truck, deflate the tires to the chassis, and they get them unwedged. But then they tow the truck and they tow the trailer, and they hand the driver a bill. Take a wild guess at how much they charge this driver to deflate his tires.
I couldn't even imagine, man.
$42,000.
See, I was gonna say like 25. I was like, nah, that's too much. Don't do that, Jordan.
$42,000.
What?
$42,000. And I have the receipt to show, because they were ready to file a claim.
And
Luckily,
is that for
luckily,
my bad? Is that does that hit the towing bill or does that hit another part of the insurance policy?
that was the tow bill.
Oh
That was the tow
man.
bill. Now here's the thing: the broker accepted responsibility, and the broker actually paid the $42,000 bill. Luckily,
Mm, mm.
because they were ready to sell the truck and tell the broker to keep your commodity, just whatever, keep it. I don't care, because they didn't have $42,000 to pay that bill.
Right. I
Yeah,
mean, a lot of people don't have that type of cash.
yeah,
Yeah, okay. Okay. So now, let's talk about doing it the right way. No daily thing, okay? What's the proper way to go about, you know, having that opportunity to scale your company because, via your relationships, you do have those opportunities that are, evergreen, they're ongoing and
mm-hmm.
they're only gonna grow from there because you're networking with the right people, you're talking with the
Yeah.
right people, and they want to work with you. What's the way that those people can, get their company structure correctly to handle that new business
Okay.
in the form
So
of a lease on?
there's the right way to do it, there's the wrong way to do it, and there's the way everybody's been doing it, right?
Okay.
I'm just gonna throw this out there. Some of you are not gonna like the answer that I give, and a lot of you probably have been programmed to believe other things that you've heard in the industry. But I'm going to tell you what we are looking for from an insurance standpoint and how it should be done from a motor carrier standpoint. Okay. If you're going to lease somebody onto your authority, right? First off, you have to have a conversation with your insurance agent to make sure that the insurance company that you have contracted with to insure your company allows you to have owner operators on the insurance, right? A lot of these insurance companies don't allow or don't even like you to have owner operators on the policy, especially if you're in that freshman sophomore year, meaning you're in the first year, second year, not going into your third. When I say junior, because I go freshman, sophomore, junior, senior.
Mm-hmm.
Realistically, they want you to be a senior when you start taking on owner operators for the more reputable insurance carriers, right? Now, so the first thing you want to do is have that conversation with your agent to make sure you can even do this, right? Once you confirm what the fleet mix has to be, whether it be 4-to-1, meaning you have to have 4 owned trucks before you can have one owner operator, or maybe they say you have to own 4 trucks the most you can add on the sport trucks the first year. They all have to be owned by you, and you can't get an owner operator until you go into year 2, whatever the case may be. Confirm that first. If you happen to be one of the individuals that have an insurance carrier that will allow you to get owner operators, the first thing you want to do is make sure you talk to an attorney and have an airtight lease agreement.
Mm.
An airtight lease agreement. Because when you take on an owner operator, that individual is representing you as a motor carrier. Your name is now plastered on the side of that individual's truck. On that cab card, it says your name under the lines, who is financially responsible for this truck. It's your name on there. You need to make sure that you have the infrastructure in place to have an airtight lease agreement. You have an inspection, and somebody to go out and inspect those trucks. Because if they fail an inspection, that also affects your DOT. You need to make sure that you're running background checks on those drivers. That to me, I run background checks on all my drivers. The only thing that will disqualify me from hiring a driver is a charge of sexual in nature. If you got something on there that has anything to do with sex or a sex offense, I will not hire you. You can have a poke me, you can have a get off me, whatever the case may, a drug charge, whatever the case may be. I don't care. But if you got to get off me on your background, I'm not hiring you. Run your backgrounds, right? Run the drug test. They have to qualify in the consortium just like everybody else. So you want a lease agreement, background check, drug test, MVR. Once you get through all of that, go over what your requirements are for them to have insurance. Because they also, even though they're running under your authority, they need to have what's called non-truckers liability insurance. And they should have at least $1 million in non-truckers liability insurance. So when they're not running under your authority and they have the truck on the road to get an oil change, to get fuel, for maintenance, to get it washed, if something happens, again, your name's on the side of that truck. They're not coming after you at that point because they're not running a load for you. They're going after the person that actually owns the truck under their non-truckers liability policy. That non-truckers liability policy also needs to have you listed as an additional insured on that policy. So any event, something like that happens, when the attorneys get involved and the attorney sends you a letter saying you're being sued and you're being roped into this litigation, you have access to that other individual's non-truckers liability policy to say, hey, listen, he has his own insurance. He wasn't running under my authority. He was running on his own on his own time. This goes under that policy.
Okay.
That's the correct way to do it.
Okay.
Now, what's common practice? You got a truck. I have an authority. How much does it cost to add this truck to my authority? Add this truck to my authority. Add this driver to my authority. Here's his MVR. He qualifies. Done. I see it every day. I see it every day. And what happens is 2, 3, 4 months down the line, I get an email. Hey, remove this owner operator from my policy. He's no longer running with us. Yada yada, whatever the case may be. And they're gone.
Doesn't that hurt eventually? Having all those.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does. Because now I have to prove why I'm removing the truck from your authority. From your insurance. I have to prove it. And if you don't have a lease agreement, with that individual, I have to show them proof or material reason why I'm taking that truck off. Because if that truck still has your name on the side of it, or that cab car still has your name on it, I can't remove it. So you have to give me a lease termination agreement saying, hey, this individual is no longer running under my authority. Once I have that, then I can submit the documentation to the underwriter to have that removed.
I got you, brother. Okay. Well, look, let me ask this.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between, that owner operator who's leased on having bobtail insurance versus, what you said, which was the non-truckers liability insurance? Is it one and the same, or are those very two different policies?
They're virtually one and the same.
Okay.
They're virtually one and the same. Bobtail insurance is basically Like if you're deadheading and things of that nature. They're very, very, very similar, even though they have different names. To be honest with you, you really can't tell the difference between a bobtail and a non-trucker's liability policy.
Okay.
I use the term non-trucker's liability because Progressive loves non-trucker's liability. That's what everybody goes to get when they need bobtail insurance. It's the easiest policy to get. They'll
Uh,
call it non-trucker's liability, but if you go somewhere else, they go, I need a bobtail.
okay. No, I'm happy to learn. We got the colloquial version, and then we have what the industry actually knows it as. So that's why I wanted to make sure that I was looking at apples and apples versus am I tripping? Are these two different things? Yeah, but
Yeah.
no, you definitely clarified that. And that was a very thorough process. And I appreciate you for going through it. I have seen it more so on the latter, what's the bare minimum we need to do in order to get linked up without the understanding of how tied to one another. It's kind of like a marriage. It's definitely like a
Hmm.
marriage, allowing an owner operator to lease on to a company. Thankfully, the people that I've seen it from, up close and personal, they have gone about it more of the appropriate way, because
Hmm.
they were the ones that really taught me about the true process and why speed isn't always what you need to get a deal done. You just got to make sure that you're doing it the correct way. So,
Yeah. I can tell you from experience, I've been doing this for a while. All of the motor carriers I've seen pop up and try to grow extremely fast, and they want to get owner operators, and they're being real quick and making decisions on haste. I want to say 9 out of 10 of them failed.
mm,
Either it was very easy it was very easy over the past 2 years to jump into the industry and make money because it was just a high demand for trucks and truckers, right? But now that we're moving into the recession, all the ones that were just trying to fly by night and just, running under the radar and cutting corners, they're being exposed and they can't hack it, unfortunately. And they're failing. And I see it every day. I had, even though it's crazy because we take a very strong consultative approach to insurance. Whereas when we're working with our clients, we try to educate you as much as possible on the do's and don'ts of the industry. And if you don't take heed to that, honestly, I won't even write your policy because I know where it's going to lead you to, and I don't want to deal with I'm going out of business down, 3 months down the line because that affects me too as an agency owner. We're looked at our retention, we're rated on a retention ratio. So
mm,
I look at this from a totally different perspective. Also, because I don't even advertise. All of my clients have come to me and were referred to me by somebody that was already in the industry. So when I get people in, I only take quality business for the most part. Even with me only taking quality business in the month of November, we lost 8 people.
wow.
We lost 8 clients saying they could not hack it because the rates took them out.
Yeah.
But ironically enough, those 8 companies, I knew weren't running the way they should have been. They were cutting corners.
And this is not just Dre's. This is just all across.
This is all across the board, and I can, and it's a lot of times people think we can't tell. I can tell when somebody's cutting corners. I can tell by the pattern of certificates of insurance. I can tell by how many times you're asking me to add a driver to your policy. I can tell based on how many times I get an alert from the insurance carrier that you're not making your payments on time. If I do a midterm underwriting, meaning I go into the system and I start pulling MBRs midterm, and I start looking at safer scores and things of that nature, I can tell. I can tell. And sometimes I'll even go into safer, start pulling stuff, look at your inspection history, and if the VIN numbers on the truck that was inspected don't match the VIN numbers that you gave me, I know you have somebody running under your authority.
Mm-hmm.
Not supposed to be there. I can tell.
which causes you to what? Say that, basically let
Oh,
them
at
know
that
that
point,
you
I
won't be able
backdate
to
the endorsement.
rewrite.
No, I backdate the endorsement.
Mm.
I look at the date of the truck being inspected. I look at the date from when your policy went into inception, and if I find based on the date that that truck was inspected versus the date that that policy was written, I'm going to add that truck back. I'm going to backdate that endorsement back to the day your policy was written. So if you owe, let's say your premium was 18,000 a year per truck, you now owe another $18,000 for that particular truck because I'm going to add
Woo.
it to your policy,
Woo.
and
Man.
I want it in full.
Right. Wow. Nah, I mean, woo. You gotta just take your time, y'all. Just do what you need to do on the front end, so you don't have to, look for that surprise check in the mail. Excuse me, bill in the mail. No, I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. As far as the drayage, right? Because in the comments we were hearing a lot of, or I saw some folks saying this, how a lot of things have really slowed down. They're seeking opportunities in drayage. Do you feel like you found any tips, or do you have any strategies maybe that you can disclose on the best places to find those drayage opportunities?
Um, when it comes to Dre, I always say because there isn't a load board for drayage, with the exception of load match. Um, I always say start. You can start with load match. And get yourself registered on load match. Just go to loadmatch.com and get yourself registered on there. They may. I don't know if they still have the pause on there where they're not taking any new applicants because I heard they had stopped taking new motor carriers over the summer. But um, get yourself registered with load match. It's inexpensive. It's like $600 for the whole year. It's cheap.
Yeah, that's the most
Um,
affordable load board, probably.
yeah, it's cheap. It's not expensive at all. And then once you get on there, build relationships with the freight forwarders and the brokers that are going to be sending out requests for bids. Don't chase every penny and every cent that's being thrown at you because you're going to get inundated with requests, right? And some people, they love to go, I'm going for the big number, I'm going for the top dollar, but the big number is going to be here and going tomorrow, right? You want consistent work. So if you have a container that's going, let's say 100 miles, that's going to pay you 1,100 bucks, I'd rather take 10 containers that's paying 1,100 bucks than take one container that's going to pay me $3,000. Why? Because that one container that's paying $3,000 is going to be here today and going tomorrow. But you just left $10,000 on the table chasing 3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Build those relationships, especially when you're in times like now where we're in a recession. And I'm throwing this out there because I don't know if any of y'all realize we are in a recession. Um, when you're currently in a recession and there isn't a lot of freight going around, or the rates are declining drastically as they are, you want to have the relationships with the brokers and the freight forwarders where they're keeping you busy. All my guys that ran clean, built relationships, they are not missing a beat. They're actually adding trucks. They're growing. Where my guys that were chasing every dollar and every cent, they're deleting trucks. They're having issues booking loads because the brokers really don't want to work for them because they know they're gonna work with me today and then try to work with somebody tomorrow and then try to work another guy another day. Mm-mm. They want all brokers and freight forwarders want consistency. Now, for those of you who don't know what a freight forwarder is, a freight forwarder is an individual that has the freight before the broker gets it. The freight forwarder gives it to the broker. You want to build a relationship with a freight forwarder more so than you want to build. If you have the opportunity to come across a freight forwarder that specializes in drayage, you want to shake that person's hand. Send them a gift. Build a relationship with them. Dedicate a truck to them because they're going to pay you faster than anybody else. They actually wire transfer the money. It'll send to you via ACH.
How long does it take to get onboarded with a freight forwarder? Would you say, from your experience?
It's very quick. They'll let you know what their requirements are. A lot of times they just want you to send over a certificate of insurance, and then you also have to fill out their W-9 and then also let them know how you want to get paid. And if you want to get paid via ACH, if you want to get paid via wire transfer, if you want them to mail you a check, they'll give you those options. Whereas with a broker, you're going to probably wait unless they have quick pay. You're going to wait 30 days, or you have to go through factoring.
I got you. I love it, man. I think that what you just said is definitely something that I can attest to 100%. Everything is relationships. Everything is based on a relationship. Okay. The reason why you and I are having this conversation right now is because we have a relationship. The reason why anything happens in supply chain is because there was a previous relationship established, and now the deal is done. So, is what he basically said to everybody was, yeah, it's not wrong to start on load match, but the whole point is just like if you're on DAT, it's not to stay on it, it's to get those relationships so that you don't have to hunt every single day anymore. You already know what's on the horizon because you've developed the relationship enough so that they tell you these things. And yeah, so I appreciate that. I mean, so freight forwarder for sure. You know what I came up on, which is along in the same lines as a freight forwarder, but the NVOCCs, the people who kind of book out the spaces on the actual steamships. Sometimes they have a wing, they have an arm that also provides brokerage services. So I would add reaching out to your neighborhood NVOCC to also find some of those drayage opportunities. And is there anything else that we somebody who is interested in getting into drayage might need to consider? Is there anything else?
Joey, I'm not sure if that's my phone or your phone, but I could not hear you for like the past 30 seconds.
Okay. Well, let's just say that it was my phone. Okay. I
Okay,
was going. Can you hear me
I
now?
can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Let's just say it was me. All right. So what I was getting to right there was, are there any other considerations that a carrier should take into place if they were interested into getting into drayage?
Take your time. One of the other things you could do is actually, if you're getting into this and you think you have the capacity to support a larger contract, is don't be afraid to call the procurement office at some of these companies like Walmart, Home Depot, Target. Um, all these companies they import freight. Nothing is made here in the United States. It's all coming from somewhere else. It comes here, it goes to a warehouse house, it's transloaded, and then it goes to the retail store or whatever the case, wherever it's got to go, and at the any end. Don't be afraid to build relationships um, with the procurement office and get registered directly with the procurement office and do it that way. Take your time, do research first. I can't stress that enough. I cannot stress it enough. You know, it it pains me when I see somebody go out and buy a truck just because they see somebody else buy a truck and say I'm gonna do the same thing they doing because somebody else is doing it. It's not that easy. Um, take your time, do the research. If you are gonna take a course, do a lot of research on the individual that's gonna be teaching that course, and then make sure it pertains to what you're gonna be looking for. I don't teach courses. I'm just throwing it out there now. It pertains to what you're looking for. I'm gonna tell you right now. The terminology of passive income is thrown around a lot in the trucking industry. Trucking is not passive. You have to be hands on. It has to be something that you touch, feel, and look at every day. If you're allowing somebody else to run your trucking company, you're basically going to allow somebody else to run it into the ground because nobody's going to run it the way you would run it. And if you don't have the time to run a trucking company, it's not the right time for you. Um, do extensive research. Extensive research. Once you feel comfortable enough Whereas a lot of the stuff that you're looking for or looking at is starting to circle back to you over and over again. And at that point, it may be time for you to make the decision to move forward. But realistically, I will tell anybody that's looking to get into this industry right now, take your time. Just take your time.
Just take your time. Okay. Well, I appreciate that, brother. I truly do. I probably have about 30 more questions, but I'm gonna save them. I'm gonna save them just because
I
I
got
do
a,
feel.
I got a couple more minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, look. Well, let
Yeah.
me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
This is more specific, right? This is
Okay.
you already operating, and your mindset to use these pieces of information. But like, how did the ERD and the cutoff time, play a role in your operation? So ERD, earliest return date, and the cutoff time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did you cater your operation around those things?
All right. So that's a loaded question, Jerry.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I try to say it. I try.
That's loaded. So, the ERD comes into play when you're doing exports and difficult. Really realistically, you have to have storage in order to try to get ahead of a lot of those things. For us, we were blessed enough to have six different parking spots or storage locations to store containers, and if we needed to, we could go up to eight where we were leaving the trucks. So for us, when it came out to the ERD, we would actually work with the broker to see, hey, listen, can we pick up this freight early, right? If we could pick it up early, we'll work with you on the storage, but we really want to get it on as long as it's not perishable, we want to get it in the container and get it to the yard. So when we know when the ERD is and they start accepting those containers at the port, we can get them delivered as soon as possible. And the great thing about it is, with the ERD and doing an export, at the end of the day, you're left with an empty chassis. So you may be able to do a double move in the port, whereas you could return, do an export, take that container into the port, drop it off, take a loaded container into the port, drop it off, and then turn around and pull a loaded container out of the port and put that container in storage and deliver it another day.
So in your mind, exports, might be it just because you have the ability to come up on the way out.
I love exports. To
Mhm.
me, exports are the way to go. Especially when you had backlogs with and now we're gonna get a little technical. We had backlogs with like Yang Ming, where we
Mhm.
couldn't return Yang Ming containers or Hapag Lloyd containers, or Oni containers. We had actually even CMA containers at one point in time where we had issues with returning those containers. You get stuck with an empty container for a month
Mhm.
trying to get it off. And if you don't have the ability to get another chassis, how are you going to continue running your operation if all your chassis are tied up with empty containers on them? Okay.
Mhm.
So what we would do is if we had an issue where we had the inability to work to return empty containers, at that point we start making phone calls to some of the brokers I know that specialize in export. And I'll let them know, hey, listen, I got 5 CMA containers sitting on my lot, or I got 10 Yang Mings, or I got the most I've had was 10 Yang Mings, which was awful. I got 10 Yang Mings, I have Hapag Lloyds, 24 Hapag Lloyds. Do you have anything available, that can be exported? We can street turn these containers and street turn the containers and use them as an export. Whether and at that point they want to know what's the condition of the container. You might have to take pictures of it, stuff like that, so they can see, what it looks like, depending on the commodity that's got to be put into it. But again, this all boils down to making sure you have strong relationships in the industry. So, we reach out, we call those brokers, and that's how we were getting rid of them. Because if not, you'll get stuck. You'll get stuck, and all the broker's gonna say is, "Oh man, buddy, I'm sorry. I'm working with you. Did you reach out to the carrier, the equipment provider, to see if they're gonna charge you per diem or not? Or can you help us with the per diem? No, I'm not paying per diem. I'm not
Right.
paying it.
Right. Okay. Well, I appreciate you for going in on that. Um, do you ever, when it comes to drayage and maybe even some of the items that somebody might be exporting or importing, do you ever see stuff that is like they require higher cargo coverage? Like, and I mean, how do you feel about just that service as a whole? Somebody being able to get increased insurance coverage on like a single load that's high volume, high value cargo.
So you can actually temporarily increase your cargo, depending on what carrier you have. You could call up and say, "Hey, listen, I got a load that's the broker wants me to have $250,000 in cargo insurance. Can I get an increase?" And you can increase it for a certain amount of time that you need it for. So if you need it for, let's say you're only going to have the container for me in your possession maybe 3 days or 4 days, they'll increase it for a week, and then it'll automatically drop back down to 100,000 after that week is up. Um, I'm gonna be honest with you. I actually prefer to take the more high value loads because most everybody in the industry has $100,000 in cargo insurance.
Right.
A lot of guys don't have 250 or $500,000. So when you're bidding on these lanes with against all the other motor carriers, you may be bidding on a load of, let's say it's a reefer load with gummy bears. It may be 25 guys, or high in the market, maybe 100 guys bidding on the same load. But if I got a load of open top container that's what did we do? We had an open top container of coiled wire that was copper wire. They required 250. Not a lot of guys bidding on that because they don't have $250,000 in cargo. And the crazy part about it is they don't even realize, a lot of guys don't realize the difference between having 100,000 in cargo and 250 in cargo, maybe a couple $100.
That's it. That
That's
is
it.
it.
That's it.
I'm so happy you said that because look at how much of a distinguisher that is to have 250K, but because you got to pay more. Did you ask how much more? Because it might
Yeah,
be worth it.
yeah.
It might be worth
So
it.
so here's the funny thing, right? When my phone rings and I get somebody that's calling up, and I'm putting my insurance agent hat back on right now. When the phone rings and I get somebody on the phone and they're screaming, "My insurance is too high. I can't, I don't know what I'm paying for and stuff like that." And as we're going through the conversation, one of the first things I always tell guys is stop shopping for price, shop for coverage. Shop for
Okay.
coverage. Now, of course, you want to make sure the coverage is affordable, but when you shop based on price, you're gonna get burned. Somebody's gonna sell you something that looks like an M&M, but it's gonna be a sugar coated piece of shit. Excuse my French. And I see it all the time, especially when I have people calling me up like, "I got Mojave and I need to get off of this crap." I'm like, "Okay." I'm sorry. I'm sorry you did that to yourself. It was cheap. They took a price, or they go with a risk retention group like UIIA. It was cheap because you were shopping based on price, and then they realized after the fact, I can't do much with this. They're limiting my growth. They want to do hair sample consortiums on my drivers, and I can't find a driver because they're failing the drug test because they're doing hair samples. But my driver hasn't smoked. My driver's telling me he hasn't smoked in 3 months, but they're doing hair sample. He failed the drug test because they did a hair
Right.
sample on
Right.
it. Or a wider wrote a policy for me, and it's a risk retention group, and I'm trying to register with the UIIA, and I'm realizing now the UIIA doesn't like risk retention groups, and I can't book any loads. So what do I do now? And I have to switch your coverage to something that is, and maybe a little more, but now you have the right insurance policy to actually run your operation efficiently.
Right.
Because there's
Right.
a big difference between effective and efficient. You want to shop based on what can I do to make sure my business can run efficiently.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay. And this right here will be my last question. Okay. My last
Okay.
question is we talked about it earlier. standard carrier alpha code. When it comes to actually getting in there and you're operating, how does your scat code come back into play? Throughout your normal operation.
So depending on what port you are, so some ports use a scac, some use a pen, but when you start pulling out of the ports, they're gonna ask you what's your. They always scream, "What's your scat code? What's your scat code?" And you have to give them your scat code when you're at the gate to make sure so you can actually get in there and pull that container out.
Gotcha. And I mean, so going back to that whole day leasing situation, that
Mm-hmm.
person screaming out somebody else's scat code.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. Now, depending on now, it's you can get away with it at certain places. You can't get away with it in others. When I say certain ports, certain terminals, you can get away with it, and then there are certain locations where you can't do it. You can't do it.
Okay. All right. Well, look, man. I appreciate you. Is there anything that you wanted to say as we close out the room?
No, just thank you for having me. I really enjoy these conversations. I haven't been on Clubhouse in a very long time. The app looked totally different from when we first started during COVID. Um, but honestly, guys, my the only thing I can really give you guys based on this conversation at this point is just do your due diligence. Do your due diligence and take your time. Because if you rush into this, you'll be rushing into a brick wall. Unfortunately, you got to take your time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, thank you so much for that advice. We appreciate you for joining us up here. And everybody, again, man, it's fourth quarter. We got 2 weeks left in 2022. So just feel free to hit me up if there's anything I can do to help. But definitely finish strong. And I guess join us on Monday as we partner with Freightwave Sonar Team to let you know where to position your trucks to take advantage of the market. But yeah, appreciate you, brother. You have a blessed evening. Everybody else too.
You too.
Thank you.